Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name's Avery. I'm a host of the Chiller Queen podcast. You guys might recognize me from 90 Day Fiancé before the 90 days, but I am now the host of the Chiller Queen podcast, and I'm just now starting to get into YouTube videos for my podcast. And as you can, it's probably going to be a little weird. I'm just starting to learn all this, and I don't have a green screen. But I want these little homies over here to be in the background. So, as you can probably tell, I am going to be covering the Dr. Phil show that just aired recently on Monday, the 27th of March, just a couple days ago. I'm going to be going through that because I have been following along with this, Madeleine McCann BS for a while. And, initially I really didn't care about it. I was kind of like, oh, okay, well, this, a simple DNA test will solve this. I don't really need to spend much time on it. But then I had some people sending me a couple of concerning things about this story. And then I started really, like, once I looked at it, I was like, she has a psychic as her spokesperson. Hmm. That's a little weird. So then I started looking into Fia Johansson, or actually her name is actually Feroza Aram. But she's changed her name a lot over the decades, changed the spelling. Johansson used to be Johnson. It used to be Johansson with two N's instead of two S's. But it's changed along the years after every scam she's gone to court for or been accused of. It's changed, so people can't really Google much of her information. But I have done two previous episodes on my Chiller Queen podcast, which you can listen to anywhere on any platform. And I did two episodes where I really dived deep into some of the evidence that kind of exposes these two frauds, but mainly Fia Johansson. I don't know how I feel yet about this one. You know, that one there, Julia, because I think she is a victim somehow, because or has some sort of personality disorder. She's suffering in some way because you just don't act the way that you do. Um, if you are a stable person. Um, but some people might get mad at me and be like, oh my gosh, she's a victim and we need to care for her. But we're talking about Madeleine McCann here. That's the real victim and her family in this entire story. These two people, I mean, I don't know if Madeleine McCann is, still missing or if she has passed. But if, these two people are alive, they can receive help, but they are using a poor innocent little girl and her family that have suffered for a really long time that don't get to have their child back. Um, they're using her to feed whatever mental disorders that they both have. I think Fia Johansson's a narcissist. You can see it all over her Facebook profile or all of her profiles. You dive into her past. She very much wants to be something that she is not. So that's why she's everything. Um, and Julia has been wanting to become famous for a while. I don't really think that this story would have reached a certain level if Fia Johansson didn't come into the picture, because I really think Fia Johansson is a master marketer because she is able to get her face out there and market herself on bullshit. I mean, BS. I don't know if you can cuss on YouTube. Definitely cuss on my podcast. But she's been able to really market this story and get it out there. And I am blown away by how much media coverage isn't really getting the real story because they're not doing their proper. I mean, I thought journalism or journalists were supposed to go through and research all their stories and really vet it, but it wouldn't have taken long for them to see what the real story is. And I'm here to expose I want this woman taken down. I want them both to shush up, but I want this one to stop using people and victimizing people because she has decades of doing it. So, of course, I watched the Dr. Phil show because that's just part of this crazy loony story. Because why would Dr. Phil bring these two on to allow them to continue to spread this narrative that I think the majority of the people out there don't even believe anymore, and they're doing their I see a lot of you guys out there trying to do exactly the same thing as I am, and I see you, I hear you, and I appreciate you. Um, but there are still people out there, and if you're one of those people who believe them, if you believe them, um, I would highly suggest maybe going and checking out my 2 episodes, where I really dive into the scammer that this person is. I'm still doing episodes because there's just so much on this woman, Fia Johansson. Um, and if you listen to that and you're still not convinced, I can't help you. I mean, you're a lost cause. You're a lost cause. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Dr. Phil decides to have them on. And I was a little like, okay, maybe Dr. Phil, who has millions of dollars and has a whole team working for him, will at least go out there and do his due diligence and do a little bit of research on these two so that he could ask the fundamental questions to really find out what the real reality of what's going on here, you know? But unfortunately, and very highly disappointingly, he did not do that. Okay. And if you want just a recap, a really brief recap of what happened in the show, you probably have already seen it. But if you want a brief recap, this probably isn't going to be the show for you because I'm really going to dissect a lot of the things that Fia said. And Julia, ooh, still trying to learn this thing. By the way, she's got a little stuffed animal. She's 21 years old. And she has a little stuffed animal she brings on there. And I just don't see a lot of sincerity from her. And I'll tell you why. She does a little speech later in the Dr. Phil show. Um, but yeah, so he brings them on, and, you know, I'm waiting for those real questions, just even smart ones that don't really take much research into. But so he comes in and he, starts saying that Julia had, garnered all these millions of views and attentions for thinking that she is the missing toddler, Madeleine McCann. And then he introduces Fia as Julia's advocate, psychic, and also a licensed private investigator. Now, right there, I was already pissed off. And the reason being is because Fia Johansson is not a licensed private investigator. Contrary to what she says on her website currently, that she's a licensed private investigator, she definitely isn't. And I found it very distasteful and just shows the lack of credibility towards Dr. Phil because he gave Fia that credibility on his public platform, that large of a platform. He gave her that credibility, and all he had to do was go to the BSIS website for California, which is the Bureau of Security and Investigative Services, and search and verify a license. You can put in all of Fia's aliases, all of them, and nothing will come up. And usually when you have a license, even a historical one, it will show if it's current or if it's expired. At least that's what I believe because I've worked in dentistry, and you can still see my license on there. It just says it's expired because I don't work in dentistry anymore. And so, and I've seen a lot of other people's that will say that if it's current or not, they don't just take your license off of the website because they have to have some sort of historical record saying, like, they have to verify if it's current or if it's not current so that people can verify if you're, current on your licenses. And nothing comes up for her. None of her aliases, nothing. But also there's just some really funny things that she does too, because recently she said she was in Poland and that she, walked into the police places and she showed them her badge, to prove that she is a licensed private investigator. So let's look at her badge, okay? I'm going to show you. I'm going to screen share this really quick. This is where it gets a little tough for me because I got to move quickly and what the heck here? Okay, this is redonkulous. Let's just go to I'm going to just start opening up. Okay. Sorry, I'm going to open all of the pictures so I can move through them pretty quickly. And it's taking me and I'll lose you. I say so. Is that what they but no, I and we'll share, with people like, why do you care? That's not what happened. Her name or her history of is uh causing, I mean, she's victimized a lot of people. She's taken a lot of money from people. Um, okay, so here's the interesting thing here. We're going to look at let's do that. Okay, so I, was looking online trying to find out if Fia Johansson Aram has ever had or in anywhere had a private investigating license. And this website came up, which was opengovus.com. And the first thing that I see is Fia Feroza Johansson Aram, because her name is actually Feroza Fia Johansson Aram. And this is her license number. It says that she is a private investigator in Laguna Hills, California. And the license type is a BSIS principal. And then the license issued was on November 17th, 2020, and expires on January 1st of 1970. Okay, already I don't really trust this website because how can are like we a time traveler? We're just gonna go back in time and that's when our license expires. I don't know. So then I looked at her license number and that's what it says right there. That's the license number for Fia Aram. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to put that into the BSIS website. Nothing came up for that. So then, um, okay, so then you go to her badge that she shows to people. Can you just help me out here? I mean, come on. This is getting nuts. This is getting nuts. I'm trying to my internet, got people waiting on me. Okay, so now this is I'm going to show you. Um so this is the badge that she has. I found it online. Let's take a look at it. Private investigator Johansson. She actually had posted this Persian medium on her story showing her badge. Well, this is the number that she has on there. It's totally different than what that website said. But if you guys didn't know, you too can have a badge if you really wanted to. You don't really have to be a cop or private investigator or anything, because I'm gonna show you exactly where she got that badge. Um, she got that badge. I'm not as quick as all you other YouTubers. Okay, so bear with me here. Um, and if anyone has any advice on, like a better like screen share thing. Oh my gosh. Okay. Badgeandwallet.com is actually, I can't find my freaking image and I really want to. I don't have to edit this freaking video. Um, so, uh, okay, there we go. Okay, so if you want to get yourself a badge as well, all you got to go to is badgeandwallet.com and you too can have your own badge to carry around. And it's not one of those little cheap ones either. It's $118, so it probably looks legitness. But yeah, anybody can actually go on there and get themselves a badge. So it's really nothing special. It's really just nothing special, Fia. Um, so there's that. That just kind of irritated me a little bit with the Dr. Phil thing. Um, okay, so then after that, uh Julia then goes into explaining why she believes that she was the missing toddler or why she believes that she's a missing girl. And what she explained on the show was that her mother didn't say, I love you, and didn't hug her. And that made her a little suspicious. And so she began researching missing children. And that's when she came across Madeleine McCann and thought she looked a lot like her. And and that's when this whole thing started. Now, I know how television works. Sometimes you can say a lot and they just edit everything of what you say and only leave little pieces of what you say um, for it to air on television. Trust me. I know. And so I don't know if she actually gave all of the story of what she has said on the internet to other people, and also articles that are out there that have been written. But it seems like the story has changed a lot from why Julia believed that she was a missing person, and also timelines of when she thought she was a missing person has changed as well. If you go on to, there's a lot of articles out there, you guys could see them. I have a screenshot, but I'm not going to try and pull it up right now because, um, as you can tell, I have some problems with that. There are things that I want to show you though as I go along here, but there is articles out there that claim that the reason why Julia first thought that she was a missing child was because that's what her grandma told her. And the timeline for that changes because there's been times where she says that her grandma told her a few weeks before this whole social media thing kicked off. And then there's also claims, and this is a claim that she said on the Dr. Phil show, was that she thought she was a missing child back in June of 2022, and that's when this whole thing started. So it goes from, you know, her grandma telling her a few weeks before the social media thing, which started in February, in the beginning of February, to now all of a sudden in June of 2022, she thought she was a missing person. And on the Dr. Phil show, she said she thought she was a missing person because her mother didn't really show the same or like motherly love that a mother should. And I don't think that necessarily makes you think that you're a missing person. You know, I grew up from a very, very like, we don't hug each other. We don't say I love you. In fact, I got a lot of problems with that. I mean, it's actually affected a lot of my relationships in my life, but I have never once thought that I was a missing person. And maybe it's because Julia says she doesn't really remember most of her childhood. And so maybe she's piecing a lot of things together that make her believe that. And so that was a little concerning for me that she stated all that. Or that was just a change in the difference of what she said. So, and then also Julia goes on to state, that she had asked her mother for documentation and pictures of her mom being pregnant and pictures of her childhood. And her mother never, ever presented her with any pictures, no documentation, no birth certificate. Basically, the first 6 years of her life were completely erased, and her mother would not provide any of that information to her ever. Okay. Um, then she goes on to talk about how every kid in Poland has to have a health book, and her health book from pages 0 to 6 were completely empty. Now, I know it's really hard to find and research things in other countries. A little bit easier in the US. I don't know the guidelines for a health book in Poland for every child, but I have looked everywhere and I cannot find a health book that is required for every child in in Poland. The only thing that I can find is that there is a pocketbook from the WHO, the World Health Organization, that is required for all children from it's a guideline for all children like from adolescence to adulthood, and it's a guideline for the doctors to adhere by, not what the children get. So I don't know about this health book. If you're from Poland and you know more about that, I would love to figure out, do you guys have a health book that is required? Because allegedly she says her pages 1 through or 0 through 6, apparently each page is 1 year, was empty. And then she said that once she started figuring this out, she had reached out to the English embassy, the Polish embassy, and she tried to report her claims thinking that she was a missing child, but nobody wanted to reach out, or nobody wanted to get back to her. And so she used the power of social media to get her story out there and heard. Now, this is very interesting to me. This is where I start to, I'm like, okay, there's a lot of factors there that we could say that there was a lot of other avenues she could have gone down before she went to the power of social media to get her story heard. Now, there are some things that people can easily do. She says she's never got her birth certificate. She's never seen her documents or her records. Now, in Poland, there is, just like we have here, I can go to, I don't have to go specifically to the hospital in which I was born to get my birth certificate. There are health places that keep all licenses, documents, records, and all you have to do is go there and request it and get it. Now, in Julia's case in Poland, they have what's called the vital record statistics offices that have marriage license, birth certificates, all the documentation for each individual, and they store them there. You just have to go to their website and request the documents. And let's see if I can. Yeah. So all you have to do basically, this is uh, the Service of Republic of Poland. Okay. So for a copy of your birth certificate, all you need is the date and place of birth, series, and a number of the identity document. And a series is basically like your social security number in Poland. Here's the thing that I find like that they have never even said at all. So all you need is the date and place of birth. If Julia wants to claim that she doesn't know her birth date, she doesn't know her place of birth, she has never once said that I tried to go to the vital statistics place in Poland and I provided my so-called date of birth and my so-called place of birth and they couldn't find any records for me. She's never said that. So also I find it funny that if Fia Johansson is a private investigator, she's really not a good one because she should know that there are these offices out there. Because later on in Dr. Phil's show, she said that she's gone to multiple hospitals, three hospitals, to get these documents, and none of them don't have any documents on her. None of them. She didn't even need to drive the 3 hours all over the place that she said that she did to try and get these documents. All she had to do is request them online. And that's how smart she is. That's how great of a private investigator she is, my friends. Okay. So now, um, we start to get into the Peter Ney. Oh, okay. Actually, I'm going to back up because there was something. If you go on Dr. Fia's Instagram account, she keeps doing these lives almost every day. It's almost like she just loves the attention. She keeps spewing off the same thing, but I keep getting so much more to the story every time she does a live. It's like you get a new thing that contradicts a previous story. And so I've been marking down a lot of this stuff. And Fia discussed not that long ago, it's a deleted live now. She's been deleting her lives. And I think it's because there's a lot of people who are looking at her story now and kind of being like, okay, this woman is starting to become a scammer. But she deleted this live now, but I took a note. And this was the real story that Fia said on why Julia thought that she was a missing person. And it was because her grandma said that she was a missing person. And she believed that Peter Ney was the person who child trafficked her here. And Peter Ney is married to her grandmother. She believes that Peter Ney is somehow related to Martin Ney, the child serial killer who was looked at in the Madeleine McCann case, but has been completely cleared. And she said that Julia, the reason why she took to Instagram, because Julia went to her grandparents' house and she said that she was going to confront Peter Ney and ask him, am I a missing child? And if you don't tell me, I'm going to go, to the authorities or whatever. Or I'm going to take other precautions, go to Instagram. And I guess Peter Ney punched her and broke her nose for talking back to her like that or threatening him. And this was 1.5 months ago that Peter Ney had punched Julia in the face, broke her nose. And Julia said that there's only one witness, which was her driver, and the driver wanted to take her to the hospital, but she didn't want to go because she was terrified that Peter Ney would come after her. And I find that very interesting because she said after that the reason why she went to Instagram was because Peter Ney didn't tell her that she was a missing person. But I thought she was also scared of Peter Ney and the way that he would react. So she decides to go to the public and get massive attention. And that didn't scare her. to do that, but she was scared to go to the hospital and report him to the police. But yet she's also reported him as a pedophile in the past, and he's apparently been convicted, but she's afraid to report him because he broke her nose. And then I also find it really funny too that if this was 1.5 months ago, there is absolutely no there is no evidence that her nose was broken. So let's take a look at Julia right after this whole thing. This was 1.5 months ago. This is screenshots of Julia's live when she first started her I am Madeleine McCann account, and that would have been around 1.5 months ago. Do you see anything here? Do you see anything? I don't see anything here. Also, when you look online to find out how long it takes for a nose to heal, it's around 2 to 3 weeks, and it sometimes takes that long for bruising to go down as well, and sometimes your nose is actually deformed. Here's another picture of around time as well, and we don't really see anything at all here. So this whole story of that Fia said, Fia's got a lot of stories, I find to be a BS because there's absolutely no evidence that there's a broken nose anywhere. Okay, that wasn't said on the Dr. Phil show. It's funny what they pick and choose on what they're going to show. And then, Fia claims that Julia was the first person to reach out to her on Instagram when she gained international attention. And she just absolutely knew that she had to take this story. And I find that very strange that Julia was the one who found her. Why would she have found her specifically? I mean, she's really nothing special, but she has definitely marketed herself pretty well. I have a hard time believing that. I think that Fia was the one who reached out to her and was like, oh yeah, this story's going to get me somewhere. I'm going to solve the case. The psychic police. Okay, so then Fia claimed, and this is the reason why I think that she really wanted to take on, and that's why I think that this story has been created in some way. I can't figure out what's going on, the dynamic between them, okay? But Fia definitely is playing into something, because back in 2018, Fia was out there, she she said that she first got into the Madeleine McCann case as a psychic police in 2018. She did not get involved in the Madeleine McCann case. She inserted herself into the Madeleine McCann case by going to all of these media outlets to write a story about a prediction that she is going to give on the Madeleine McCann case. She didn't get involved. Well, she did. She inserted herself into it, but as a psychic police. No, she just gave a prediction. And she said that she believed that Madeleine McCann would be either found between 2022 and 2024, or on the Dr. Phil show, she said 2023 and 2024. And ironically, it's around that time. And she says that it will be from she's living in Germany, and gives all these other predictions that are, pretty different than the whole Julia thing. But basically, the family in some of the articles completely dismissed her at the time because they don't believe in psychics or mediums. But conveniently, Julia was living in Germany when this whole thing happened. She's from Poland, but she was living in Germany. And so conveniently, Fia enters, and somehow it seems a little bit of there's some cooperation with Julia's story. And Julia also likes music, and Fia predicted that Madeleine McCann was going to be a famous singer and that she loved music and all this other stuff. So it just seems like this story is very weird. Like it's been very like premeditated almost. And then Sophia goes all the way to Poland and she tells Dr. Phil she goes all the way to Poland and or not yeah, she goes all the way to Poland and she scans Julia's body to see if all of her markings on her body matches the same birthmarks uh as Madeleine McCann, and she said, "Yeah, all of them are there." It's a miracle. Okay, so now the Dr. Phil interview begins, and Dr. Phil asks, you know, when did Julia think that she was Madeleine McCann? She said in June of 2022. And like I said, that keeps changing. That timeline definitely keeps changing. And Dr. Phil, then goes to show all of the pictures that she posted on her Instagram account. She shows the audience of some of the markings that are similar, that she believes are similar to the Madeleine McCann thing. And in my, the colomba, which is the little eye defect, that's something that Julia showed that she had as well as, similar to Madeleine McCann's. And she said, oh, well, now it's faded. When Dr. Phil was like, oh, so you have a colomba or you have that little eye defect in your eye. And she's like, oh, well, it's faded now. But when you look online, there's no cure for a colomba. It doesn't go away and certainly doesn't fade away. So that's interesting. And Dr. Phil asked her what age she was, and Julia said, I'm 21 according to the documents. But Julia said that she'd never even, seen any documents of when she was born or any of that kind of stuff. So according to documents that she's never seen, she's 21 years old. Madeleine McCann would have been 19. So that's why she thinks that she's actually potentially 19, not 21. But that's what the records say. And the records can be doctored, she said. Dr. Phil then goes on to show a clip of a forensic psychologist that was on News Nation who basically was saying that why didn't Julia go to the parents privately if she really thought that she was their child rather than going straight to social media? And I thought that was really interesting because that, like, why wouldn't you do that? And she said that she had tried to reach out to a few people before, but she needed to go to the power of social media to get this story out there because nobody was returning her phone calls. And then they talk about Julia's early childhood memories. And she said that she doesn't remember anything from her childhood from before the age of 9. And she only remembers being sexually abused after the age of 9. But there's only one specific memory that she remembers from a long time ago. And interestingly enough, this one specific memory was her on some beach with these little tiny baby turtles that had hatched. And they're on white sands and they were on a vacation, and she remembers really light buildings. All this stuff can be seen online. Like you can easily get that information about the Madeleine McCann case online. And so Dr. Phil, he was a little concerned about that. He actually brought that up and he said, so, all this stuff can be found online. So how do you separate this being a memory versus something that she's seen online? And he asked her advocate, Fia Johansson, what was her response? This is why I think that, Fia has absolutely no credibility, because Fia Johansson responds so confidently. She said, because when I asked Julia for, to tell me the story, she never changes her story. She's always given me the exact same story over and over again. She never changes her story. And when you are lying about something or being dishonest, your story will change over time. When I find that really funny because Fia's story definitely changes over time, but she is a pathological liar. And that's just been proven. I'm at 2 episodes that I did. But then Dr. Phil fires back right after that. And he says, I've done a lot of interviews before with people. And I find that it's actually the opposite. He finds that people who repeat themselves with the exact same story over and over again is actually rehearsal and not recollection. And I just I always want to know what the other person is gonna say or think, after somebody says that, especially with Dr. Phil who says he's a forensic psychologist, and Fia has absolutely she says she's a doctorate in psychology, and she is absolutely not. Um, there is no education out there that even corroborates that. Um, she is not a doctor of anything. Uh, but for her to say that just kind of shows that she's really not credible as a person. Um, and so that's kind of I didn't get to see her facial expressions after that. They just kind of cut away. Um, so they talk about not being able to see the birth certificate and stuff like that. And this is something that I was like, okay, Dr. Phil, why this is so easy, because Julie is obviously in America. She had to get a passport to come to America. And I wanted to know what the requirements were to get a passport in Poland. Because I know here in America, you have to have a legitimate birth certificate. And it gets really vetted by these people. Like, you cannot get one if they think that your document has been forged or any of that kind of stuff. Um, oh, this is for a Polish ID. So I know you have to have one in America. So I went to go and see on the Polish website, which I translated into English, super easy to do. And I went to go see what their requirements were. And this is what you need for a passport, not birth certificate. Bear with me here. Don't let me lose you, okay? Uh, uh, I really need to get a lot more organized, really, really ADD over here. Here we go. Okay, what you need for your um so okay, yeah. 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 Okay, I didn't save the right stuff. This is ridiculous. I'm so stinking sorry. Um okay, so basically what it was saying was that you needed to have something that shows that you are a Polish citizen. So you needed to have your Polish ID card, and then there are some requirements in order to get your Polish ID card. And basically what you need is an up-to-date photo. You need your identity document. And it says you are exempted from submitting a valid travel document or an identity document if you have a certificate that you are a victim of human trafficking, and due to special circumstances, you do not have such a document and you cannot obtain it. And Julia has never said that she has a certificate for that, because right now she's actually trying to figure out if she has been child trafficked. So she obviously doesn't fall under that category. You need documents necessary to confirm the data and circumstances provided in your application. Documents confirming the inability to obtain a travel document of the country of origin, documents confirming the status of a stateless person. So you basically need documentation that confirms, if you can't find any of your documentation. You need confirmation of registration for permanent or temporary residence. And then confirmation of payment for issuing the document will be required. So I went to go and see, this identity document, what you needed, and that's basically where it came to what you needed for. I mean, this is what I'm freaking all over the place. I'm freaking all over the place right now. So okay, the gist of it is that you have to have all of your credible documents that prove that you are a citizen of Poland. You cannot fake any of your documents. There are things that you have to prove in order to prove who you are as a person. In order to obtain a passport and birth certificate may be required if they feel like you're giving them BS. But also the birth certificate can be a form of verification. And all of this stuff actually has to have a seal on it, and it has to be verified document. So it goes through a whole process. It's a long process that all of these documentations go through. And if they feel like you're, scamming them or whatever, they will require even more documentation to prove that you are who you are. So Julia's had her passport for a long time because she's said on her Instagram account that she has gone in, like she's gone into the UK, she's flown in other places doing various things, and obviously she flew to America. So if I was Fia Johansson, that would be a question that I would have and I would want to address to the public, because that is just something that I'm itching to ask her. I really want to know how she has all of these documentations if she has no documentations. And how did she get over to did she get smuggled into America? I don't know. Um, so yeah, so Dr. Phil asked Fia, well, if you flew to Poland, um, and surely because you're a private investigator is what he said, then you obviously have done a simple records check with her in Poland. And the keyword is simple, because it is pretty simple to do that. And Fia says that one of her team members drove 3 hours to a hospital that her mother claimed that she was born at, and they found nothing. She says, team member. She always likes to throw my team, because I'm a boss. I'm a boss. And actually, then she starts to say, oh, but then she went to 2 other hospitals and found nothing as well. And so I'm wondering, is it your team or were you there? Because you're even changing your story on stage. Your team drove 3 hours, but then you were saying that you were also at the hospital and the other ones. Like, you're already kind of changing up your story. Um, and she said that, Fia keeps saying that her mom refuses, Julia's mom refuses to talk to her and continues to refuse to talk to her. But how is her mom also telling her things? Like, Julia was born in this hospital. Maybe she's getting that information from Julia. I don't know. But there's a lot of things where she's, even in articles, that she says, well, I've talked to Julia's mom and she has told me this. But then in other articles, she's like, oh, and even on Dr. Phil, she said, no, her mom refuses to answer my phone calls or talk to me whatsoever. So, is she only picking and choosing what she's telling Fia? I have no idea. Everything is all over the place with these two. Um, So she says she goes to 3 hospitals, doesn't find any records. My question is, why didn't she just go to the vital statistics records office and request that birth certificate or those documents? Because she's a stupid private investigator, if that's the case. I mean, I'm a smarter private investigator than she is. I mean, that was the first thing that came to my mind. And if she's world renowned and she helps all these police, she's been through law academy in Sweden, which is a lie. Okay, and I go into that in my other episodes on her whole history, her fake history. Uh, but yeah, she should have all this training and she should know all the right things to do. Um, but you know, Julia goes on um to I'm all over the place. Okay. So she then goes on to talk about how, her childhood memories, blah blah blah. And so we ended off where, Dr. Phil had said, how do you separate those and blah blah blah. Well, the reason why Fia said that she definitely believed her, and she said this on the channel, that Fia did her little investigation after Julia had given her this information about seeing turtles and her memory. So she goes on and she looks at the geography of the place that Madeleine was last seen, and how at that time new turtles can be born May through June. I looked into that particular area, and the area and the place where Madeleine was taken, all of the beaches around there actually don't have any of the turtles they're loggerhead turtles, and they do not hatch around that area. They do hatch in the farthest southern area of Portugal, and there's a certain beach, and they don't even hatch there anymore because they are endangered. But there is a certain beach, and it's actually during May and June that the larger turtles come up onto the sand, or actually it's like between February and May that they actually come up onto the sand and they nest. And then 2 months later is when the turtles actually hatch, and they make their way immediately. They hatch in the middle of the night. They make their way immediately to the sea and go off into the sea. So you will potentially be able to see them, but it's actually in the later months, and it's actually during July and August is when you'll actually see those turtles. So it took me a lot to find that information. And so, Julia is just, again, a terrible private investigator. But I also looked at the map of where the islands are that surround the area where Madeleine was taken, and they're nowhere near the sandy beaches that these turtles hatch, and there's only one area where they hatch. They don't even hatch there anymore. um, and Dr. Phil asked Fia, okay, I already talked about that. Um, so Dr. Phil, basically starts off the next segment saying, there's been a lot of people online that are speculating that Julia might just be an attention seeker. And he goes in to talk about how Julia in the past has been hospitalized. And the most recent one was in 2018. And Julia talks about how, the first two, she was hospitalized because she tried to commit suicide. And then she said that her one in 2018 was because she was delusional. And then Dr. Phil's like, oh, so, you were hospitalized because you were delusional. And she's like, no, I wasn't delusional. And then it changes back to, I was suicidal. And then Dr. Phil's like, looks at his little notes and he's like, well, this is what it says. It says that you were hospitalized in 2018 for being delusional. And Julia said, I wasn't delusional. Um, I have all of the records. Me and Fia went to the hospitals, and we acquired all the records to prove that I was not delusional. And she said that, she hadn't harmed herself. She hadn't been aggressive towards herself or cut herself since she left the hospital in 2018, all the way until 2021, when apparently um, she was hospitalized again for trying to commit suicide. And Dr. Phil kind of like was like, "Oh, I didn't know about that one. You didn't really tell me about that one before you came onto the show." So that one just came out. Um um So, yeah, they said that they went and they got proof from the doctors on, all this information. And my question is, why didn't they provide this proof to Dr. Phil? Dr. Phil has no problem showing documents on his show to prove some of these claims and what they say, right? So why weren't those, they always talk about all these documents that they have. They have all this proof, but a lot of just talking. They don't show any of this stuff. And I really don't think it's a privacy concern, because Fia is on she is on a live almost every day talking about Julia's traumas to the world, to people who don't even care to hear her. She's on there to share all of this information to the public, that I feel like if you're really, really traumatized and you need help and you haven't had the help and you haven't gone through the process yet, you would think that that would be even more traumatizing. And I know that even just having public attention in and of itself is trauma. I went from not being known to being known almost overnight, and I had to go through a lot of mental, like, it was very traumatizing for me being exposed to the public, and I still deal with some things, but I'm not actively on television, so I am a lot better now. But she went to 1 million followers almost overnight. Things went viral. She had the world attacking her. That's trauma in and of itself. And if you are a victim of a very traumatic experience and you truly, truly believe your story, um, I wouldn't be online like just talking and talking and talking about what I have been through. And Fia is just out there like, she can't pee or she can't poop, she can't do anything. I've seen all her documents. I was crying, like all this stuff that she says that she has. And she's out there just continuously victimizing Julia, if that's the case. So I just call BS on a lot of that stuff. Fia also then claims that she took Julia to a psychiatrist to be evaluated when she came to America. And they didn't really talk about what the findings were on that. Um, but they go on to then talk about, Fia starts saying that when somebody is dead, this is where she goes into her psychic claims. When somebody is dead, I have this connection to them and she can sense and feel where they are. And she said that with Madeleine, she's always had this energetic connection, but that Madeleine was a sad person. And no, she's not the person that she is, but at the same time, she doesn't know exactly who she is. And that is contrary to some of the articles that she wrote back in 2018, that particular story. Um, and so it also was just a little like, you know, weird to me, because that's why she said that she's so connected to Julia, because she feels like Julia is like kind of similar to that. And she's very energetically connected to Julia. And she goes on to say that she said and reported, yeah, we already talked about that, what she said with the Madeleine McCann thing. And she went on and, talked about what she said so she can get her little psychic thing out there. But she has had a history of inaccurate readings that have scammed a lot of people out of money. Like, people are still talking about how they are still paying off a lot of credit card debt because of curses that she said that they had and needed to be removed. And she's $35 a minute. Like, people have spent a lot of money for her lies and her scams. And unfortunately, when you're a psychic, you can't really like do that because you should kind of know better that you shouldn't be doing that. And that's kind of how she's been getting away with like, scamming people out of money. But then there's also other things that she's boldly out there claiming that she is, and she is definitely not. She has no actual track record of helping anybody. I have searched a lot of the cases, and I talk very extensively about some of those cases in those 2 episodes, so I highly suggest checking that out. Um, and then they go on to talk about Julia seeing a picture of a man that was reported as the guy seen on the night Madeleine went missing. And it absolutely shook Julia to her core because she recognized this man. And this man was Peter Ney, that had sexually abused her as a child, which is married to her grandmother. Initially, Julia had said online that Peter Ney was the father of Martin Ney. But if you look online, Martin Ney's father died when he was 13. And so that story changed, and she thinks that he could actually be just related to Martin Ney. But Peter Ney, and this is what I found interesting, because I was trying to find information online for Peter Ney, and that's hard because I'd have to pay for requesting a lot of court documents and stuff. But in the background, there's this document that comes up that says Peter Ney was found guilty, and there was an article that was shown from the Rush Translate website, and that's just a website where they translate Polish into English, or you can translate it into any language. And it showed Peter Ney found guilty. Um, I really want to find that document, but I can't find that document. But apparently, it was given to Dr. Phil. So, and Dr. Phil seems to truly believe that Julia was abused by Peter Ney, and that Peter Ney was found guilty for something, and so he does believe that happened. Because Julia said that Peter Ney was found guilty of what he did to her, and that he's related to Martin Ney, because she describes a picture of Martin Ney that was found in the possession of Peter Ney. And a lot of these accusations like that come together, okay? If this whole story crumbles, it's going to start feeling really weird, all of these other connections that they have fabricated and created in connection to Madeleine McCann. If it comes back that Julia is just Julia Faustyna, I'm going to question every single narrative and story that these 2 women have pushed, that have been all the reasons why she believes that she's Madeleine McCann, and has tried to construct all of these connections. That's just going to blow their credibility out of the water. So in Fia, when she went into she heard the name Ney from Peter Ney, and she said that, oh, she got goosebumps and all the memories started floating back because this is a child trafficker, predator, and she truly believes that Ney is related to the Madeleine McCann case, contrary to what Scotland Yard has actually cleared Martin Ney from being involved in the Madeleine McCann case, and they actually have a different person that they truly believe is connected. But Fia Johansson, the psychic police, she truly believes that Martin Ney is connected to the Madeleine McCann case. And so that's why she was just like, ooh, yo, like, ooh, this is it. This is it. This is Madeleine McCann right here. This is my story. Okay, and then now we go into the DNA test. Dr. Phil asked Julia if she's gotten her DNA tested. And she said that, Fia helped her with Ancestry. And Ancestry does take about 8 weeks for the DNA to come back. I was like, okay, I'm glad that they did that, because for a long time they were trying to find other avenues to get their DNA tested. And I was like, all you got to do is put it into 23andMe, Ancestry, anything like that. You can find your family tree. So they did do that, and they are waiting for the test results. So then Dr. Phil says, if the DNA test comes back, it's consistent with her being related to her biological mother, and that she's not related to Madeleine McCann. What will she do? And she had a really hard time answering that. She was just kind of like, like she didn't want to accept that reality. She was just like, no, I'm Madeleine McCann. I am Madeleine McCann. And then he's like, no, but like, what would you do if you're not? And she's like, oh, I would not talk to my mother again. I would not talk to her again. She was really uncomfortable answering that question. Um, and Dr. Phil states, obviously this can all be resolved by a simple DNA test. Would you give your DNA test to Scotland Yard? They have Madeleine McCann's DNA test. They can easily match it together and squash this whole entire story. Or they can look into it further. They'll be able to tell. And she said, I've reached out to Scotland Yard many times and nobody is willing to do that. They've never gotten back to me. They're not willing to help me in any way. And it's probably because they've already completely debunked her claims. They're not going to use their resources to on somebody that they know, even from a biometric standpoint. They've done a lot of analysis and they've completely disregarded this woman as even being capable of being Madeleine McCann. But Julia is, and Fia especially, is not backing down. Not backing down. So this is also another really interesting thing that I thought was interesting that Julia said, because Dr. Phil said, if you give your DNA test to Scotland Yard, will you do that if that's a possibility? And Julia oddly said that if the DNA shows from Britain, then yes, she will take it. And I thought that was really strange, because she's not like, if the DNA test comes back and proves that I am or am not Madeleine McCann, then yeah, surely the DNA, her roots are from Britain. I will take it. That's it. And I don't really like trust the fact that they're doing their own independent DNA test. I think that S is going to come out and they're going to have a new storyline, but we're never going to be able to see the results of the test. They're not going to show it online. They're not going to prove the documentation. They're not going to do any of that stuff. They're going to, I think that's where the story is going to, there's going to be a part 2 to this, my friends, because everyone's like, oh, you just need the DNA test. You really think these women are going to let go of all of this attention when they love attention? Fia's a narcissist. She's soaking this up right now. She's wanted to do is be famous, and now she's riding the coattails of this story, and she's getting all this publicity, all this attention that she has been craving and she has been wanting, and that's why she's on freaking lives every day for an hour spewing the same thing. She loves it. You really think this is going to end? This ain't going to end, my friends. Watch. Mark my words. Or she's magically going to turn into a different missing person. I'm just saying. So yeah, Dr. Phil then, thanks them both for coming on, and he believes that they were very forthcoming. Okay, forensic psychologist, very forthcoming. All you had to do is a little bit of research into the whole story of what's going on here, and he would have been like, a lot of things aren't adding up. I got a lot of questions, and I would be like, who's this chick? Like, what cases have you solved? Tell me your most famous case. Tell me more about you and why you wanted to get into this. Like, I don't know. She's super, super sketch. She's really sketch. But this was the interesting part. So Julia then cuts Dr. Phil off and she says, I would like to make a statement to all victims out there who have been sexually abused. And I will tell you, there was no sincerity in her. It was almost like it was like she thought she had to do something like that. So She was super uncomfortable, super awkward. There was no emotion. Like if she was passionate about what she was saying, she would be talking about it in a very passionate way. And passion comes from something that you have experienced and that you really believe in and that you want to fight against. And what was coming out of Julia was so awkward and so unemotional and uninspiring. It was that was the emotion that she had for the people. Um, but like literally this was they cut to this woman's face when she was giving the speech. I thought it was hilarious. Because this is how my face was. Like literally that's how my face was. Like, okay. I can't handle this. I can't do it. Help me get out of here. That's pretty much like I'm sorry. Like, okay, yeah. Anyway, I'm rude sometimes. So now we're into the last 10 minutes of the segment. Those ladies are gone. He brings out two body language experts who they're part of this show called the Behavior Panel, and they've worked on some really major cases. And they basically were watching the entire episode to sense any deception or any weirdness coming from these, Fia didn't really talk much, so it was mostly Julia that they were able to analyze. I would have loved them to analyze Fia, and they didn't say anything about Fia. That's who I want. That's who I want. Okay. Um, so these two people, one was named Scott Roosh and the other one was Chase Hughes. Dr. Phil asked Chase Hughes what he thought. So Chase Hughes first explains that every time Julia was asked about the DNA results or getting DNA tested, that she began to start blinking her eyes a lot. And then her breathing patterns would change. It would go up through like her diaphragm and she just got like shorter breathing. And the pattern changed. And he states that when this happens, it's because of a really high stress situation. So there's something about the results of the DNA test that are causing her a lot of anxiety. And I personally think that Julia is afraid to lose the attention that she's been getting if she's been proven that she's not Madeleine McCann. Or she doesn't want to think about that because that's potentially an end to the story. That she doesn't want it to stop. I mean, it's completely changed her life. She's living in America now with some Persian medium chick and some big mansion of scam money. And so I feel like there's a lot of anxiety surrounding her DNA test, which should be coming up here soon. Pretty excited about it. We'll see if we get the right results. And then Scott, the other guy, my dog is trying to. Do you see my dog? Do you see her little face pop up right there? She's like, hello, give me some attention. You've been talking a lot. So then you have Scott, and he says that he doesn't really sense any. You're going to see my dog's head pop in and out. Scott then says they aren't really. Stop it, dude. She's whining at me right now. She says he's not really seeing any signs of deception from her. Just cues of doubt, that she doubts her story. He noticed that her shoulders like shrugged, which don't show deception, but it shows doubt in her story. And he noticed shoulder shrugging right and left throughout the interview. And then he followed up with that, there's no cues of deception, but only doubt. And I'm kind of like, okay, well, if she doubts her own story, isn't that kind of deception? Like if I'm saying something and I doubt what I'm actually saying, there's a little bit of deception there. But apparently, like, I guess if it's a blatant lie, you have different cues. But Dr. Phil then kind of gives his perception of what's going on here. And he basically says the reason why he doesn't think that there's this like narcissistic behavior coming from Julia, like she just wants attention, she's attention seeking, is because he thinks that there's some emotional and mental overlays that are working here. And Julia is dealing with some sort of disassociation. She has disassociated herself from past trauma, and she has recreated this reality for herself and believes that that stems from just a really traumatic past, and that Julia has potentially constructed this missing person reality, and she has began to get lost in this belief system. And I can sort of subscribe to that. And I think that Fia is exacerbating that reality for her. Because she Julia, I feel like is potentially experiencing a lot of cognitive dissonance. She is not allowing her mind to go to any type of evidence that would prove that she's not a missing child, because she doesn't want to be a part of the world that she's been living in. She wants to be a part of this new world that she's been created for herself. And that's a big possibility. And so when they talked to the body language experts, they were thinking the same thing. And they said that when people have delusions and they've created this new reality for themselves and they actually believe it, there's difference in deception cues. And the reason why they probably didn't see deception cues is because she kind of believes her story. So there's not necessarily deception. She's not blatantly lying. She's just delusional. And that these doubt cues would go in line with that, because maybe she is kind of like, am I or am I not? Like, she's somewhat doubting this new reality for herself. And she's delusional. And so that's where you get the difference in those deception cues. Um, so Dr. Phil then ends it. He says, Dr. Phil said that the biggest thing that he was really highly bothered by was Fia saying that Julia tells her the same story every single time with the same detail. And he asked the body language experts, did that bother you guys too? And they said, absolutely. Because that's a tall tale sign that this is something that is rehearsed. And then they ended it on that. Dr. Phil asked the audience, and I thought this was really interesting, because this is how delusional those two are. And if you believe these people, let me just tell you, you are the minority, my friend, because even the audience, I found this to be really funny. Dr. Phil asked the audience, how many people believe that Julia is telling the truth? And I'm not going to tell you that number, but I will tell you, he asked, how many people believe that that Julia is not telling the truth? And this is what happened. You got the whole audience here. They don't believe a dang word. Even Dr. Phil's over there. He's raising his hand. They don't believe a word she's saying. I think there was like 3 people who actually believed she could potentially be Madeleine McCann. But I think this is a very interesting story. I think that this story is just the beginning of something that is greater, and I want to take this woman down. That's my real goal. I don't want her to victimize anybody else. I don't want her to find other people to manipulate and exploit and scam, because she is a fraud. She knows she's a fraud. There's a history of fraud. Oh, I could go more on and on and on. I'm going to be doing another episode of evidence that I uncovered with her, so stay tuned. I'm going to be uploading this to my YouTube channel. You can find a link to the full episode of the Dr. Phil show if you want to watch that. You can watch that or find the link down below. And if you want to, you know, uh, I would highly suggest checking out those 2 episodes that I have on the Chiller Queen podcast. I'm going to be doing this a little bit more. But if you like this episode, make sure that you like it so that I can, get this story out there more, because I have written to the Dr. Phil show producers and I have provided evidence on the things that they did not find or cover. I also I have reached out to a lot of these media companies that are spewing the same information that Julia or that Fia Johansson is spewing, and I provided evidence. Nobody's bothering to get back to me. So it looks like we have to turn to the power of social media. Am I right? Am I right? Giving these two attention is not what I'm trying to do. I'm actually trying to take down a scammer, and stop exploiting victims. And I want to completely discredit this woman because she has manipulated a lot of people, and I want to take her down. I want to take her down. I want to expose her. So thanks for tuning in. Share this video if you feel called to. Get this information out there, and I will see you next time, my friends. My friends. Bye bye.